Mizmor leDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar, bin odeh sheyarbitzeni, amei menuchat, yenaleini. Nafshi yeshovev, yancheini v'maglei tzedek, yancheini v'maglei tzedek, leman shemo. Gam ki elech begayitz al-mavet, lo irara ki ata imadi, shivtecha umishantecha, heima yenachamuni. Ta'arok lefanai, shulchan neged soirerai, tishanta l'Hashem roshi, kosi revaya. Achtuv v'chesed yirdefuni, kol yemei chayai, v'shavti beveit Adonai le'orech yamim. Adonai ro'i lo echsar, Adonai ro'i lo echsar.
As Cantor Rosenbaum began our service chanting Psalm 23 in the Hebrew, please join with me, "The Lord is my shepherd," in English. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. It's hard to say goodbye to such a kind, loyal, and loving man. And yet we're here gathering together to support Jeff's incredible family and to honor a very special man. He was a good neshama, a good, kind soul. And we'll do that by sharing words of praise as we recall Jeffrey Wynbrandt, a beloved son, a beloved brother, a beloved husband, a beloved father, a beloved grandfather, uncle, and friend. And today we extend our deepest condolences to Jeff's family, to Betty, the love of his life, married for 55 plus years, together for 60 plus years, I think. You were each other's best friend, high school sweethearts. We offer our condolences to the apples of Jeff's eye, his three boys, his guys, and their partners, to Jonathan, to Jamie and Shaylee, to Brian and Katie, and to the diamonds in his crown, the ones who made him Papa, or better yet, Baby Papa, his grandchildren, Haley and Jack, and to all the extended family and friends, to all of us who mourn his passing. He now joins his parents of blessed memory, Helen and Jack, his brother Ronnie, and all those who have gone before. This morning we have a few very special family tributes, and first, Jeff's grandchildren, Haley and Jack, will share words.
We're going to be speaking on behalf of our grandma. When you walk down a hall and see the one you are going to marry at the age of 15, can you even imagine? 60 years later, we are still together. The love of my life, Jeffrey Wynbrandt, was failing. My heart and my life was broken. Every day, I felt empty for the sweetest, kindest, most wonderful man in the world. Yes, we had ups and downs, happy times and sad times, but he struggled to stay alive for me. This man loved and lived for life. For over 24 odd years, he struggled with CLL, going back and forth to Columbus for treatments. It was a rugged life to live so he could see his boys grow up, his two magnificent grandchildren grow up. He's a man who was so in love with his family, friends, and me. My heart cried as he tried to get through this insanity, and all the while he was the shining star in all of our lives.
October 2nd, the love of my life went into hospice, struggling to live. After so many years of driving to Columbus and chemo trials, the one thing that kept our guy Jeffrey alive was the love of family, friends, and life. The sacrifice he had gave to get to this point, laying in bed in hospice, was beyond imaginable. The ups and downs of love, life, marriage, relationships, and dreams is now going to be a memory beyond words. Jeffrey Wynbrandt, I can truly say you were and will be the best friend I could ever have and had in my life. You have gave me 3 gifts in life, Jonathan, Jamie, and Brian. Then we got special gifts of Haley, Jack, and Katie. How very lucky for gifts like this. Jeffrey, I will love you forever and always in my life and in my dreams. What a special husband, father, and papa. Love you forever and always, my baby boy.
And now we call on the youngest, Brian.
It's a little long, but bear with me. Try to get through it. Thank you for all coming today. I'd like to think there's a place in our memories that we go to when we pass. A place where we can return to any moment in our life, like picking a chapter in one of those old DVDs, and we get to relive the moments in our lives that define us, a greatest hits, if you will. And when I think of my dad, it helps me picture him back in those chapters, back in those moments where he was so full of life and love and kindness and humor, because those are the words I think we would all use to define him. And since today is a day of celebration of a life so well lived, I thought it very important to put on that DVD, that mixtape of Jeffrey Carl Wynbrandt's life to relive those greatest hits. So let's start with Grandma and Papa and Uncle Ronnie and the BB gun story. If you're lucky enough, you got to hear Helen tell it. But the story went something like this. My Uncle Ronnie had a BB gun, and he and his kid brother Jeff were playing in the basement. And my Uncle Ronnie thought, I'm going to point this gun at my kid brother's ass and pull the trigger. And so he did. And I can only imagine the heart attack my Grandma Helen had upstairs in the kitchen of the house on Grosvenor when she heard my dad howl in pain. The story goes she took the gun from my Uncle Ronnie and with Superman-like strength bent it in half. I like that memory because it tells us pain isn't always a bad thing. It reminds us to laugh sometimes too. And then there's my dad in his dorm room at Ohio State. He told me once how when Papa dropped him off, he simply said to Helen, "Let's go." That was my Papa. But if you knew him, as most of us did, Papa's quick goodbyes were kind of like when Buttercup tells Wesley in Princess Bride, "As you wish," which really meant, "I love you." One of my dad's favorite movies, by the way. But what I love about that memory of Papa saying his quick goodbye was that it was his way of saying, I love you. And it's a good memory because it reminds us that when someone leaves us quickly, as it may be in the end, they're also saying, I love you. And at Ohio State, my dad became a Sammy. He told me all about his buddies there. I'd like to imagine him walking down the halls, smoking a doobie, getting ready to go to a Buckeye game. I know he loved his Sammy brothers deeply, all of his friends from college and high school in his formative years. But as this is a greatest hits, there's one story from his days with his boys that always stuck with me and one I'd like to share. And that's the story of how he and Mark Lessem once ran from a group of South Euclid tough guys because Mark had flicked them off on Cedar Road. Now, I might be getting the particulars wrong. Maybe it was on Warrensville Road, but he had always had such a smile on his face and laugh in his eyes when he told me that story. I'd like to think that he's reliving that moment again, that thrill of danger, the exuberance of youth. In the last 20 years, I've enjoyed watching Mark and my dad's bromance flourish during visits to L.A. I like those memories because it's a good reminder that no matter how far someone is from us, it's the memories of them that keep us close. And like I said, my dad loved and lived for his friends. And none were closer or more dear to him than Arnie and Rochelle Cohn. You both have been there for him and my mom always, but especially these last few years and these past 6 months. Arnie, my dad, loved going back to school with you at Tri-C, and he loved your lunches together. And to Sylvia and Mark, your constant presence these last few months meant so much to him. I thank all of you so much. And I invite all of his friends, from David Butler to the Smiths to the Sharps and everyone in between, to remember a moment with him and to remember that even though he's far from us now, you can always talk to him in your hearts because he would like that very much, because he loved all of you so very much. And I invite all the members from his big, glorious family to do the same. He loved his nephews, Stephen, Ryan, Ari, Jordan, Ross, and Jason, his sister-in-laws, June, Gail, Paula, Ellie, and brother-in-laws, Leon, and the one-of-a-kind late Jeff Nathanson, cousins Ronnie and our dearest late Sue Pollock, Matthew, Carly, Gina, our wonderful Howard Hurwitz, Leslie, Heather, Hallie, and Ted, and of course, to the Lash family. You held such a special place for my dad. My Papa Jack's youngest sister, Rosie's family, was always with us. To my sweet, dear Auntie Rosie, my late big-hearted Uncle Danny, cousins Laura, Karen, Michael, Liz, and Toa, I want to thank all of you for loving my dad the way you did and keeping him in your hearts always. So if you knew my dad, and I'm assuming since you're here you did, then you knew he loved to run. He was an avid workout enthusiast. He'd run on the track at the JCC or the streets of Beechwood. But one year he had the thrill of running one leg with the Olympic torch. It was for the Winter Games in Salt Lake. My brother Jamie had submitted a letter to Coca-Cola, who was holding a contest for people to run a leg of the torch relay. The letter spoke of how my dad had inspired Jamie to stay in culinary school, amongst other things. And I have to say, as the writer in the family, I was proud and maybe a bit envious that his letter won the contest. I was living in LA at the time, but my then girlfriend Katie, who is an Olympic enthusiast, was so psyched to hear my dad would run with the torch. She had to be there. She was still attending OSU at the time, so she drove up from Columbus and spent the day with my dad, took pictures to capture the event. And what she didn't know then was that what she was really capturing was my dad's heart. Of course, I married that girl. She's my rock, and she's here today as a Wynbrandt through and through. My dad loved her so much, and he would always say to me that he was so touched by her sharing that day with him. It's a memory that's not even mine, simply theirs. But it reminds me that simple acts of caring can leave an indelible mark. Thank you, my love, for being such a good daughter to him. And to Kim and to Shayla for loving him like daughters too. He loved you all so much. And of course, he had 3 sons, and my brothers Jamie and John and I have a trilogy of greatest hits. From watching the Ohio State-Wisconsin game on a small handheld TV right before my cousin Laura got married to Ed 209, to when Jamie stomped a ketchup packet onto a man wearing a white suit in Rehoboth Beach. Of course, my dad had his back. And to John karate chopping him in the throat, playing around at a dinner party, and a million other moments of silliness. You see, the three of us were not easy. I vividly remember the day we moved into the house on Ainsley, a house he and my mom had built from the floorboards to the ceiling. And it took one night of John, Jamie, and I running around like Meshuggahs to put a hole in the wall in Jamie's bedroom. He was rightfully pissed. I mean, he honestly should have been more pissed, but he always had patience for us in the ways that mattered most. Sure, he yelled at us like any father would and should, but his love was always present, always available, and never, ever in question. I like to think of the three of us as little boys, with no idea where the world or the wind would take us, but feeling so safe underneath his sails, because that's what he always was for us. Our boat in the storm, our guiding light. I think it's important to remember that because the waters now feel choppy and uncertain without our captain at the helm. And yet the course he sets for us remains unchanged and stable because of him. And that guidance we hand down to his two most precious beloved gifts, Haley and Jack. His love for them was like candy with no cavities. He could have eaten them up forever. They gave him the unbridled joy and sweetness only grandchildren could give. I want you two to remember that lesson your papa taught you. That life, even when it's bitter and hard and ugly, that if you love and you take care of your family, there is unending sweetness in life waiting for you that will never fill you up. Every moment with you two has been a greatest hit. But I'm asking you two to remember them. Haley holding onto Piggy on Papa's couch, or Jackie boy referring to him as baby Papa. He loved that. He loved you both so much. And I'm so grateful you two got to make your own greatest hits with him. You know, before I mentioned the movie Princess Bride, it's kind of funny that leaning on it so much here, but it kind of makes sense. After all, my dad gave me my love of movies and storytelling. From the time he took me to rent movies and he introduced me to the black and white Manchurian Candidate, I was hooked, destined to tell stories of my own. But The Princess Bride, he loved it. He quoted it. But I think the reason it spoke to him so much is because it's at its heart, it's a story of true love. And my dad had one true love in his life. And the story goes that he spotted her sneaking into Heights High. He was a hall monitor, and she was the South Euclid beauty playing hooky from Brush. They're to find boys. They saw each other and talked. Well, he wanted her hall pass. He took his job very seriously. But that was it. He was smitten. And I like so much to think about the butterflies he must have felt in his stomach the first time he saw her, or when he went home that night in his bedroom thinking of her. Could he have known then the life they would make together, the epic, gorgeous, beautiful love story they would write? I want to imagine he's right back in that moment, dreaming of the girl from Brush High. I want to imagine he's there right now, and that he gets to live it all over again. Because their love for him was heaven. And to my mom, my strong, determined, loyal mother, who is the true foundation of our family, who stood by him through every battle and every war during these last many years, I want to say thank you, Mommy. Thank you for being the rock and for fulfilling the promise you made to Grandma that you'd always care for him. And you did it, not out of obligation, but because he was your true love too. And every bit of your life together is something he cherished and marveled and felt so blessed to have. And so I like to think he's there now, reliving it all of these greatest hits, these great memories, because maybe that's what heaven is, getting to live all the good and everything else in between all over again. And maybe we all play a part in it too, that every time you think of him, those greatest hits you shared with him, the ones I don't even know about, are heaven for him and allow him to live on in all of us. I love you, my daddy. Rest easy. Amen.
Jeff was incredibly proud of his children. If you didn't know, he liked to brag about them. And you don't always follow a Hollywood writer at things like this, but Brian, I know how incredibly proud your parents are of you and your dad was of you. In fact, at one of his premieres, he got to fly his dad out to Alcatraz and to meet some of the stars, Sam Neill and others, and Jeff was in his element. And I know really the same thing for Jamie and your restaurateur and chef, and to cavil over you and Jonathan, your work in the medical field as a physician. You have made your parents so incredibly proud. Jeff was the top banana, the pick of the week, the grocer's special. If you don't know, he was in the produce business. Jeff was loyal and loving, a people pleaser, a mensch, compassionate, outgoing, gregarious. He could talk, and he could talk more. He's funny. Even just a few weeks ago at his grandson Jack's bar mitzvah, Jeff had everyone laughing up a storm. To quote his boys, he was a world-class spaz. That die-hard sports fan that taught his boys to yell at the TV, the fitness freak who kept himself in shape, and movie buff, as you heard. But also Jeff had an incredible work ethic. He was reliable. He sacrificed for you. He'd do anything for you. If you called and asked for help, he'd drop whatever he was doing and come right over. A good listener who gave the best advice, although he didn't always listen to his own advice. A fighter with an unfathomable will to live that would just bounce back each time. He called himself the man of steel. For Jeff, the cup was always full. Not half empty, not half full, but full, even in the last couple of weeks of his life, as his health was significantly declining, and that he knew the end was near. It was full. He lived a full life. He could look at Betty, his children, his grandchildren, his friends, and know he was blessed. And he expressed gratitude to me for his life. Brian, you told the story about the Olympic torch that he carried. In fact, when we met yesterday, you pulled it out. You have the actual Olympic torch from Salt Lake City that he carried. And the torch said something like this. I don't remember the exact quote, but the fire that remains lit within. And that was Jeff. Jeff had an incredible fire. It was a fire of kindness and a fire of love. And when we get back to the house, we're going to light a candle. And that candle is meant to last for 7 days to represent the soul as the soul begins its ascent to heaven. But Jeff's light, Jeff's fire, this is fire in a positive way. Jeff's light has burned so brightly. He has left a lasting mark. That love, that warmth, that generosity and the kindness. We know that he may have only ran a small leg of that Olympic torch relay, but that Olympic torch still burns because it's how he lived his life with you, Betty. There's a second part to the story that Brian began to tell about how they met. By the way, it was senior cut day that Betty cut, but she wasn't a senior. She was only 15 years old. She decided that she was a senior. And the moment that Jeff met her at Heights High and asked for the hall pass that she didn't have, after they met, and he actually introduced himself with his full name, I'm Jeff Wynbrandt, but he had to go. He had to go somewhere. So they had actually just a momentary chance encounter. The second part, the addendum to the story is that, yes, Brian, you talked about how your dad was smitten with Betty, but Betty was also smitten to the point that the next day, where did Betty go? Back to Heights High. And that day, when you guys talked for just a little bit, Jeff asked you out. And Betty, you shared with me that those couple of weeks of dating were incredible, but then your mother passed away. And it was in those couple of weeks that really the relationship cemented. Betty, you became a fixture in Jeff's home, and that his parents took you in as your own. And those moments when you were 15 years old, 15 and 16, the bonding that you had bonded you together for life. You told me that you were an item at that point, that when Jeff went to Ohio State and you were still in high school, you stayed together, although Jeff did go on dates, supposedly, while you were in school. But you would call him when you happened to go to Ohio State, and if he said he had a date, he said, sorry, I can't see you when you come down. But every single time when Betty came down, he canceled those dates to be with you, to surprise you. He did give you his fraternity pin, later an engagement ring. You planned to get married in the summer, but he had to go to summer school. He told his professor, I have to pass this test because I have to get married. Luckily, Jeff passed the test, and you got married September 7th, 1969. You are the perfect pair, and Jeff was the perfect partner on the dance floor and off in life. You loved to go out dancing at the ground floor of the Swamp Club. You did everything together, always, whether it was traveling, whether it was taking care of the kids or the grandkids. You loved to travel. Thankfully, you took the opportunity early in your marriage to travel. You listed off some of the places for those cruises: Europe, Hawaii, Tahiti, the Caribbean, Santorini, and the last cruise you took along the New England coastline. You became his caregiver, as we heard. You kept him home. That was your promise to him. You'd sing and dance each day together. In fact, Jeff wrote a song, and these were the words that you would sing every single morning, dancing around the house. I just want to celebrate another day of living, another day of life. And he did, and you did, together. You were the love of his life, his China doll. That's what he would call you. As we said, Jeff went into the family business of produce and grocery, working with his dad, Papa Jack, in the business. He made his dad proud, starting at H&W Buy-Right at Cedar and Green, the community grocery store known for its good quality produce, a personal touch with a loyal customer base, how they took care of those who couldn't afford to pay. The business expanded to food center at Cedar Center, then into wholesale work, produce, Volpe & Sons, and Sanson Company. When Jeff would wake up at 2:30 a.m. to go downtown, working at the food terminal, he was so good with produce. He made his dad proud. In the last few years of his career, he worked at Heinen's. It was always everyone's favorite, always helping you pick just the right melon or just the right everything. He knew. Jonathan, you shared with me that you remember going to the grocery store with Dad. On Sundays, you had to put all the papers together, section by section by section. You could still smell them right now. You loved being in the shop with your dad and your Grandpa Jack, how you'd wrap the cherries in cellophane wrappers, always tasting a few, except for the time that you dropped a whole bunch of cherries. You tried not for no one to see, but of course your dad knew. He noticed something was off in the display. You told him they just fell. You didn't tell him that you dropped them. As if you don't know, cherries are like gold in the produce industry. Jonathan, Jamie, and Brian shared beautiful memories of a father who was always present, loving and caring, who gave the best advice, who taught you how to work hard, provide opportunities for each of you to grow, and always learn valuable life lessons. Whether it was how to drive a stick shift like his dad did to him, just sticking him in a truck and say, go, drive. Jonathan, the story goes that you were 3 and needed to be potty trained to go to JCC preschool. It wasn't going so well, let's say. But you really wanted to mow the lawn. So your dad worked a deal. Somehow, immediately you became potty trained and you could help mow the lawn with him. You told me that with Dad you always felt supported, protected, and defended. how much you loved your fun family vacations. Jamie, you remember getting a bicycle and that it didn't come with training wheels. Regardless, Dad took you to the street. He held the back of the bike for as long as he could. He let go and you did it. Dad was so excited for you. He loved playing basketball in the driveway where Dad would falsely claim that he was a member of the prestigious All-Lake Erie League. Beating you until you finally beat him. You, in fact, worked with Dad for a year. He taught you his work ethic and your passion for food. And Brian, we already heard from the baby boy. You recall Dad as loving, warm, good. He tuck you in at night, tell you stories, uses voices and impressions, and as you said, instilling a passion for you into storytelling. He was the best grandfather for Haley and Jack. He would do anything for you, nothing more important than spending time with you, always ready to help, pick you up, drive you around. And Jonathan, you have a special picture of your dad when he was holding Haley when she was just a baby, the way he would look at her, and the special bond that he had with both of you. You'd come over and sleep over, and he would watch you play your sports games, whether it's football or field hockey. Jeff died in this tenuous time period. We are in these days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the days of repentance. The rabbis say that someone who passes away during this time period on our calendar is a tzaddik, a righteous person, that only God would allow someone so good to pass away in these most holy periods of time. We know Jeff was good. He was simply a good man, a good simple man. He'd say it like it was, no pretense. He had a strong faith, a deep devotion and connection to our congregation at B'nai Yeshurun, and we are so grateful to that. It's hard to say goodbye to such a good man, filled with so much life, but we know his cup was full. May his cup always be remembered as full. May we know the love that he gave to each and every one of you. We know how much you gave to him. You took care of him, made sure that he had dignity and care, and always encircled with love. May his name always bring blessings, and we say, Amen. We'll rise now as Cantor leads us in the memorial prayer.
El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamtzei Menocha Nechana, Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, V'malot Kedoshim Otarim, Kezar HaRakia, Mazhirim et nishmat Zelig ben Yaakov v'chaya Sarah shelach le'olamo began Eden temenuchato Ana balarachamim hasirei u'beseiter kenafecha le'olamim Otrar b'tzarar ha'chaim et nishmato Adonai hu nachalato Ve'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo Ve'nomar Amen.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest and shelter and presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Zelig, Jeffrey Wynbrandt, who has gone to his eternal home. We ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May he merit the reward for living life the right way, with kindness and with love. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life, and may he rest in peace. And we say, Amen. We can be seated. Following the service, interment will take place at Mount Olive Cemetery And then the family will be receiving friends today only at the Tavern Company Restaurant on Lee Road in Cleveland Heights today until 6 p.m. Shiva will then turn to the family home on Wednesday and Thursday evenings from 6 to 8 p.m. at their home in Twinsburg at 2656 Coral Court. Those who'd like to donate in Jeff's memory can do so to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, St. Jude's Children's Hospital, and the James Cancer Center.
Ask those who are pallbearers to step forward at this time, please. Pallbearers, we're going to lift up on the casket. We're going to walk towards the double doors. As we turn towards the hearse, once we get up here towards the hearse, we're going to place the casket on top of the roller. We're going to pass it forward. Service will be at Mount Cemetery. We ask that those going to that service, please ensure directly to your cars, put on your hazard lights and your headlights. Thank you on behalf of the Wynbrandt family for being here. Yeah, thanks.